Well, we finally have a ruling in the AI battle. We finally got a ruling in that one judge in the Northern District of California has ruled that Anthropic's use of copyrighted material to train its large language models is considered fair use in some cases, but in some cases not. My name is Derek Fahey. I'm an IP and patent attorney, and I've been following this AI battle essentially, and AI war, I guess, about over whether or not the copyrighted material that's been used to train the LLMs for generative AI technologies like OpenAI's ChatGPT, or the use of that information for Anthropic's particular training model, or use of Anthropic's use of copyrighted material to train LLMs, whether it's considered fair use. And again, I'm Derek Fahey. I'm an IP and patent attorney, and I just thought this was really interesting because it's going to be providing a playbook for other judges potentially to how they're going to maybe actually want to rule, and also how businesses are going to be moving forward, how they're going to actually act in order to comply with laws and make sure they have the low risk of having an issue with copyright infringement. So first off, what is fair use? Fair use is actually a defense to copyright infringement. And what happens is if you write a book and you want to, when you write a book, you actually have the rights for, if people want to copy it and use it. And what these authors are complaining about is they're saying, hey, you're using our copyrighted material, our books, to train your large language models, and we're not being compensated for it. And in response, OpenAI and Anthropic, all these other AI-related companies, what they're saying is, no, it's considered fair use. And the court, Judge Alsup, who is a senior judge in the Northern District of California, where Silicon Valley is located, he's ruled on many different cases related to tech, and he took this case and he actually ruled on it. I think it's probably going to be in his legacy. And essentially, he said that certain uses were considered fair use and certain uses were not. I'm not going to bury the lead. The part that was actually not considered fair use was the pirated copies. What happened is Anthropic actually made copies of pirated versions of the copyrighted works that the plaintiff sued under, and the Judge Alsup found that those copies were not considered fair use. I'm not going to focus on that. Let's focus today on the scanned versions of the copies that basically form the corpus of the AIs, the large language models, or LLMs, training data, and then also the digital copies. So essentially, the court treated the digital versions and the scanned versions of the copies. They gave them this different analysis, but they ultimately decided in both the same way. For the scanned version, the court found that because the original version was destroyed, the scanned version actually was also considered to be, the use of the scanned version was also considered to be considered fair use. The digital version was also considered to be fair use. And essentially, to get to the fair use factors, or to get to whether or not the use of copyrighted material is fair use, there's a 4-factor test. The first factor is the purpose and the character of the use. The second is the nature of the work. The third is the amount and the substantiality of the portions being used. And the last one is the effect on the market. The first one, the first factor, which is the purpose and character of the use, is generally the most important factor. And Judge Alsup actually found that this factor for both cases were considered fair use. Both the scanned and the digital copies were considered fair use, because he said the use of the copyrighted work in order to train the information and extract the data the structure from the books was considered fair use. He said, he actually had an analogy. Think of it this way: when you read and you dissect and you learn the information and you maybe regurgitate it in another form, that learning of the information is that you're entitled to do that. You're purchasing the book and you're entitled to actually have that knowledge. And so essentially that's what he said. The use of the work was considered transformative because it was only learning the parallel structure. Now, the second part of the test, which is the nature of the copyrighted work, that was actually found to be fair use, not fair use, for all different versions, so for all the different types of material that was used. The court found that the materials was actually original and also creative, so that weighs against a finding of fair use. The third and fourth factor, which is the amount and substantiality of the work that was copied, the court found for both the scanned and the digital versions were considered to be fair use because they copied all the information in the books, but it was only what was necessary to dissect the information and to understand the structure of how the words in the book and the sentences were formed in order to make this transformative use. So because the research is transformative, they were entitled to copy the entirety of the work. The last part of it, which is the effect on the user, the effect of the market, the value of the copyrighted work, judge also found in both cases for the scanned and digital versions that they were considered fair use because he said, and he articulated that it's not affecting if I have a book and I'm pulling information out of this book to train my LLMs, that is actually not affecting the value that the author may get from selling the book to somebody else. Okay, so he found both fair use for both the scanned and the digital copy. Now, the other side of the argument for the authors is that, hey, we should be entitled to get some compensation for them from pulling the structure out of it. But the judge basically said those are not rights that are articulated in a copyright statute. So he found that it actually weighed for a finding of fair use. So ultimately, pirated copies found to be not fair use, but the scanned version with the original version deleted and also the digital copy used to train the LLMs for Anthropic were actually found to be considered fair use. That is the first case that we really have a ruling on this in this particular way. There have been some other rulings, but this is kind of the first big one, I think, and I'm really curious to see how it continues on. It will definitely be appealed. There's no doubt about that. But this is the one of many things, many battles in the war of the generative AI. And quite frankly, I'm not surprised on the ruling. There's just too much money at stake. And, I think this is a fair ruling. Some people are not going to like it, but it is what it is. My name is Derek Fahey. If you liked this video and you thought it was helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. It helps myself and my team's families. Thanks so much. Have a great day.